Hyperinflation doesn't happen by accident. It's not some random natural disaster that strikes without warning. It follows a script, a predictable five-step pattern that's played out in country after country, decade after decade. And right now, America is following that script with terrifying precision. Let me show you. Berlin, Germany, 1921. The First World War had just ended. Germany owed crushing war reparations to the Allies, debts so massive there was no conventional way to pay them. The government faced a choice: default on the debt, admit bankruptcy, face international humiliation and economic isolation, or print money to cover the obligations. They chose the printing press. At first, it seemed manageable, a little extra currency in circulation. Prices rose slightly, but nothing alarming. People adjusted. But printing money is like a drug. Once you start, stopping becomes harder than continuing. By 1922, prices were doubling every few weeks. By 1923, they were doubling every few days. 1 trillion marks for a loaf of bread. Workers needed wheelbarrows to carry cash for lunch. Life savings that could have bought a house in 1921 couldn't buy a postage stamp in 1923. The middle class, the backbone of German society, was obliterated. People who'd done everything right, who'd saved responsibly, who'd trusted the system, wiped out. But here's the critical detail nobody talks about. The government saw it coming. Economic advisors warned them in 1921 that this path led to hyperinflation. They knew. And they made a deliberate choice to print anyway because the alternative, default and austerity, was politically unacceptable. The people suffered, but the government officials, the ones who saw it coming, they quietly converted their wealth into foreign currency, gold, and international assets. They survived just fine. Harare, Zimbabwe, 2007. Different continent, different century, same script. Economic mismanagement and land redistribution policies destroyed Zimbabwe's agricultural output. Government revenue collapsed, but spending commitments remained. The gap between income and obligations grew into a chasm. So President Mugabe's government did what every failing government does: they printed money. Inflation started at 10%, then 50%, then 500%. By 2008, Zimbabwe's inflation rate hit 89.7 sextillion%. That's 89,700,000,000,000,000%. $1 trillion Zimbabwe banknote couldn't buy a loaf of bread. The currency became worthless paper. The economy collapsed into barter. Millions fled the country. But again, look closely at what happened before the final collapse. In 2006 and 2007, while the government was publicly insisting everything was under control, senior officials were buying foreign assets, converting wealth into U.S. dollars, purchasing property in South Africa and London. They knew the Zimbabwe dollar was doomed. They prepared. The people who trusted them? Destroyed. Caracas, Venezuela, 2016. Oil prices collapsed. Venezuela's socialist government had built its entire economic model on high oil revenue, using that money to fund massive social programs and government payrolls. When oil crashed, revenue vanished, but the spending commitments remained. You know what comes next. They printed money. Inflation exploded to 10 million% by 2020. A cup of coffee that cost 450 bolivares in 2016 cost 1 million in 2018 and 15 million in 2020. Wages couldn't keep up. People starved. Over 7 million Venezuelans, a quarter of the population, fled the country. And once again, the pattern held. While the government publicly denied the crisis, while President Maduro appeared on television blaming foreign saboteurs and promising recovery, the elite were converting wealth into dollars and offshore accounts. They bought property in Miami, moved money to Panama, stockpiled gold. They saw it coming. They prepared. Everyone else paid the price. 3 countries, 3 different eras, the exact same pattern. Here's the 5-step hyperinflation cycle that destroyed them. Step 1. Massive government debt beyond the ability to repay through normal means. Step 2. Money printing as the solution to cover obligations without raising taxes or cutting spending. Step 3. Official denial. Inflation is temporary. We have it under control. Trust us. Step 4. Elite preparation. Those with inside knowledge quietly convert wealth into hard assets, foreign currency, gold. They position themselves to survive what's coming. Step 5. Currency collapse. Hyperinflation destroys savings, wipes out the middle class, creates social chaos. First in Germany, then in Zimbabwe, then in Venezuela. And now, in America. Let me show you where we are on this timeline. Step 1. Massive government debt. The United States national debt currently stands at $35.7 trillion. That's trillion with a T. To put that in perspective, U.S. GDP is roughly $27 trillion. Our debt to GDP ratio is over 130%, higher than it was at the end of World War II. But it gets worse. That $35 trillion only counts official debt. It doesn't include unfunded liabilities, the promises we've made for Social Security, Medicare, and government pensions that have no identified funding source. Add those in, and we're looking at over $150 trillion in total obligations. There is no scenario, none, where we pay that back through conventional means. Tax revenue in a good year is $4.5 trillion. Even if we eliminated every single federal program except debt service, we couldn't make a dent. We are beyond the point of conventional repayment. Step 2. Money printing as the solution. The Federal Reserve started QE in 2008, a fancy term for creating money out of thin air to buy government bonds and mortgage-backed securities. The Fed's balance sheet, essentially how much money they've printed, went from $800 billion in 2008 to $4.5 trillion by 2015. Then COVID hit, and the printing press went into overdrive. In just 2 years, 2020 and 2021, the federal government created over $5 trillion in new money for stimulus payments, unemployment benefits, business loans, infrastructure spending. The M2 money supply, the broadest measure of dollars in circulation, exploded by 40%. 40% in 2 years. They chose the printing press over fiscal responsibility, just like Germany, just like Zimbabwe, just like Venezuela. Step 3. Official denial. Remember 2021? Inflation was clearly rising, prices were spiking across every category, and what did Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell say? Transitory. Inflation is transitory, just temporary supply chain issues. Nothing structural, it'll resolve itself. He said that in March 2021, he said it in June 2021, he said it in September 2021, even as CPI hit 5%, then 6%, then 7%. It wasn't until March 2022, after inflation had hit 8.5%, that the Fed finally admitted they'd been wrong. But here's what's really happening. They're still lying. They report CPI at 3-4% and claim victory, even though alternative measures using honest methodology show real inflation at 10 to 15%. They downplay the numbers, they change the formulas. They tell you everything's under control while your purchasing power evaporates. Official denial. Step 3, right on schedule.
Washington, D.C., 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in October 2019. Most of the federal buildings along Constitution Avenue sit dark and empty. But not all of them. On the 3rd floor of a nondescript Treasury annex, 6 blocks from the White House, fluorescent lights burn bright. The parking lot below holds a row of black SUVs, engines off, drivers waiting. Inside, men in dark suits sit around a Max Shackle conference table. No cameras, no press pool, no public record of this meeting will ever exist. They're not discussing the budget. They're not arguing over policy proposals or reviewing quarterly reports. The documents spread across that table have a different classification entirely. crisis scenario protocols, monetary emergency frameworks, contingency plans for events the public isn't being told to worry about. The hum of the lights, the shuffle of paper marked internal use only, the weight of decisions that could reshape the financial lives of 330 million Americans. And outside those walls, silence. No announcement, no leak to the media, just the quiet machinery of preparation turning in the dark. This wasn't an isolated meeting. In the fall of 2019, the Federal Reserve conducted what they called crisis scenario exercises, emergency simulations testing the financial system's response to catastrophic stress events. They ran the numbers on currency collapse, liquidity seizures, mass bank runs. They modeled what happens when everyone tries to get their money out at once. These exercises weren't publicized. They appeared in footnotes of quarterly reports, buried in technical language that ensured nobody outside the banking elite would notice or understand. While you were scrolling through your newsfeed, while cable anchors debated impeachment hearings and the latest political theater, this was happening in rooms you'll never enter, discussed by people whose names you'll never know. Think about that for a second. Why would the Federal Reserve, the institution that controls the money supply of the world's largest economy, run simulation after simulation of a currency collapse? Why would the Treasury Department update emergency banking protocols in the middle of what they kept calling a strong, stable economy? What do they know that you don't? Here's what they don't want you to realize. Those midnight meetings, those crisis simulations, those quietly updated emergency frameworks, they weren't exercises in paranoia. They were preparation. Not preparation to prevent a crisis, preparation to manage one, to survive it, to control you through it. And here's the thing nobody's talking about. Whatever they were preparing for in those meetings, it wasn't framed as a possibility. It was framed as a timeline. Not if this happens, but when this happens. Not how do we prevent it, but how do we position ourselves before it arrives. The clock isn't ticking down to a potential crisis. The clock is ticking down to an inevitable one. And while you were living your life, paying your bills, saving for retirement in accounts you think are safe, they've been building the architecture to survive what's coming. What if I told you the government has been quietly preparing for the collapse of the dollar, and they've been doing it for years? What if I told you they're not trying to stop it? What if I told you every mechanism they've built, every policy they've implemented, every safety measure they've sold you was designed not to protect your wealth, but to trap it? Let me show you what I mean, because you've already felt it, even if you haven't connected the dots yet. So what were they preparing for in those midnight meetings? Let me show you, and I guarantee you've already felt it. Walk into any grocery store right now. Pick up a gallon of milk, $4.89. 5 years ago, that same gallon cost you $3.20. Eggs, $5.50 a dozen. In 2019, you paid $2.80. Ground beef that was $3.99 a pound is now $7.20. Your morning coffee, your gas tank, your electricity bill, your insurance premiums, everything costs more. Significantly more. But here's the kicker. Your salary? That stayed roughly the same, didn't it? Maybe you got a 2% raise, a 3% cost of living adjustment if you were lucky. You're making almost the same amount you made in 2020, but your life just got 30% more expensive. The government calls this manageable inflation. The Federal Reserve spent 2021 telling you it was transitory, just a temporary blip from supply chain disruptions and pandemic recovery, nothing to worry about. By 2022, they admitted inflation was higher than expected, but insisted they had it under control. 3% here, 4% there, totally normal, totally fine. But let me pull back the curtain on something. The inflation they report and the inflation you actually experience are two completely different numbers. The official Consumer Price Index, the CPI that makes headlines, says inflation peaked around 9% in 2022 and has since fallen to 3 to 4%. Mission accomplished, right? Except the CPI is calculated using a formula that's been revised multiple times since 1980, each revision conveniently making inflation appear lower than it actually is. They changed how they measure housing costs. They introduced hedonic adjustments that claim your laptop is cheaper because it's more powerful, even though you're paying more dollars. They substitute cheaper goods into the basket when expensive ones become unaffordable, calling it consumer choice instead of what it really is, desperation. Independent analysts using the original 1980 CPI formula, the one that measured inflation honestly, put real inflation closer to 10 to 15% every single year. That matches what you're actually experiencing when you buy groceries, fill your tank, pay rent. The inflation you feel in your wallet is real. The inflation they report in press releases is a carefully engineered fiction. And they know it. They absolutely know it. Why is the government stockpiling hard assets while your savings lose 10 to 15% of their purchasing power every year? Why are central banks around the world buying gold at record levels if paper currency is so stable and trustworthy? Why did the Federal Reserve expand its balance sheet from $800 billion in 2008 to $9 trillion by 2022 if everything's under control? Here's what's actually happening. And this is the part they will never say out loud. The government isn't trying to stop hyperinflation. They're preparing to survive it, to manage it, to use it, to control you through it. And here's the thing nobody's talking about. Imagine you're on a sinking ship. The hull is breached. Water's pouring in. The crew knows there aren't enough lifeboats for everyone. But instead of telling you the truth, instead of giving you a chance to find a life vest or swim for shore, they quietly reserve the best lifeboats for themselves. They lock the lower decks. They smile and tell you everything is fine while they're already planning their own escape. That's where we are right now. The ship is sinking. They know it. They've known it for years. And while they prepared, while they ran their crisis simulations and updated their emergency protocols, they told you to keep contributing to your 401k, keep saving in dollars, keep trusting the system. This has happened before. Weimar Germany, Zimbabwe, Venezuela. Every time the same pattern. Massive government debt that can't be repaid. Money printing as the solution. Official denial that anything's wrong. And then, when the currency collapses, the people who saw it coming, the elites who quietly converted their wealth into hard assets and foreign holdings, they survived just fine. Everyone else? Destroyed. And the playbook they're using right now? It's the same one that's destroyed currencies for the last 100 years, word for word, step by step. Like they're reading from a script. Let me show you that script. Because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it.
Step 4. Elite preparation. And this is the smoking gun. While the government tells you inflation is under control and your savings are safe, watch what they're actually doing. The Federal Reserve ran emergency crisis scenario exercises in 2019 and again in 2023. These weren't publicized events. They were quiet, internal simulations testing what happens during currency collapse, bank runs, liquidity crises. Why simulate a crisis if there's no crisis coming? In July 2023, the Fed launched FedNow, the infrastructure for a central bank digital currency. They call it a payment system, but the framework is unmistakable. Programmable money. Money the government can track, control, freeze, or confiscate digitally. The Treasury Department has updated emergency banking protocols, the legal frameworks that allow them to declare bank holidays, freeze withdrawals, seize assets during national emergencies. The infrastructure is in place. The legal authority exists. They're ready. Now watch what the people with inside knowledge are doing with their own money. Congressional stock trading data from 2023 and 2024 shows unprecedented purchases of gold, farmland, and foreign assets by elected officials. Senators who sit on banking committees, who receive classified economic briefings, are buying hard assets while telling constituents the economy is strong. Billionaires are doing the same. Jeff Bezos sold $8.5 billion in Amazon stock in early 2024. Mark Zuckerberg sold $4.3 billion in Meta shares. Bill Gates is now the largest private farmland owner in America, controlling over 269,000 acres. Why are the richest people in the world, people with access to the best economic analysis money can buy, moving from stocks and digital assets into land and tangible property? Because they see what's coming. They're preparing, just like the German officials in 1921, just like the Zimbabwean elite in 2007, just like the Venezuelan oligarchs in 2016. Elite preparation. Step 4, check. Step 5. We're approaching the final stage. The M2 money supply is at all-time highs. The dollar is losing its reserve currency status as BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, increasingly trade in their own currencies instead of dollars. The velocity of money, how fast currency circulates through the economy, is beginning to accelerate after years of stagnation. We're not at the collapse yet, but we're at the preparation stage, and that's exactly where the elites want to be positioned. They're not in the lifeboat yet, but they're standing right next to it, ready to jump in the moment the ship starts sinking faster. And while they prepare, what are they building? What mechanisms are they putting in place to manage the crisis when it comes? 3 systems, all operational right now. First, central bank digital currency. The Federal Reserve has published white papers on CBDCs. This isn't conspiracy theory. These are official Federal Reserve documents outlining how a digital dollar would function. Total government control over the monetary system. The ability to track every transaction. The ability to freeze, tax, or confiscate your money digitally without ever walking into your house. Programmable money. Money where they decide what you can buy, when you can buy it, how much you can spend. Think I'm exaggerating? Go read the white papers yourself. The technology enables restrictions on purchases, expiration dates on currency, negative interest rates that drain your savings automatically. Second, emergency powers framework. The legal infrastructure already exists for the government to declare banking holidays, freeze accounts, restrict capital movement. This isn't new. FDR did it in 1933, closing every bank in America for 4 days and making it illegal to own gold. The Emergency Banking Act, the Trading with the Enemy Act, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. These laws remain on the books, updated periodically, ready to be activated the moment the president declares a national economic emergency. Third, bail-in legislation. Most people think bank deposits are safe because of FDIC insurance, and up to $250,000 they are. But what happens if you have more than that? Or what happens during a systemic crisis when the FDIC's $125 billion insurance fund has to cover trillions in deposits? Here's what they don't tell you. Under Dodd-Frank, the legislation passed after 2008, banks have the legal authority to convert your deposits into bank equity during a crisis. It's called a bail-in. Your cash becomes stock in a failing bank. This happened in Cyprus in 2013. Depositors with over 100,000 euros had their accounts seized, converted to bank shares worth 30 to 40 cents on the dollar. And Dodd-Frank explicitly allows the same mechanism in the United States. Your bank account becomes their asset in a crisis. These mechanisms exist right now. They're not theoretical, they're not conspiracy theories, they're policy, ready to be activated. Germany, Zimbabwe, Venezuela. The five-step pattern destroyed all of them, and America is following that script step by step. Massive debt, money printing, official denial, elite preparation, and the mechanisms to control you when the collapse comes. But it gets worse, because there's one more piece to this puzzle that makes 2026 more dangerous than anything we've seen before. The elites aren't just preparing to survive hyperinflation, they're preparing to use it.
The CBDC infrastructure development, the emergency banking protocols. This is what it was all about. They print the money, inflation soars, people panic, they offer the solution. Digital, controlled, permanent. Hyperinflation isn't the disaster they're preparing for, it's the tool they're preparing to use. And the CBDC is the endgame. But here's the thing. You're hearing this now. You see the pattern. You understand the plan. And that means you still have time. Not much, but some. Enough to make a choice. We started in a government building at midnight. Fluorescent lights and classified documents. Men in suits preparing for something they weren't telling you about. We followed the evidence through history. Germany, Zimbabwe, Venezuela. The same five-step pattern playing out across decades and continents. We saw where America is on that timeline. Every step checked off. Massive debt, money printing, official denial, elite preparation, the mechanisms of control ready to deploy. And we uncovered the endgame. Hyperinflation as a tool, crisis as justification, the CBDC as permanent digital cage. The government is preparing for hyperinflation, not to stop it, but to manage it and you through it. The CBDC system is being built to replace your freedom with control. And this isn't decades away. The timeline is years, maybe months. I know this is heavy. I know it's disturbing. You might be feeling angry right now, anxious, maybe overwhelmed. That's normal. That's the appropriate response to learning you're living through a historical transition that most people won't see until it's too late. You just learned that the exits your grandparents had in 1929, the ability to grab their money and protect themselves, have been sealed. You learned that the system has been deliberately designed to trap your wealth when crisis comes. You learned that the people running the system have been preparing for years while telling you everything's fine. That's a lot to process. Take a breath. But here's the thing they don't want you to realize. You're not powerless. You have a choice. Right now, today, you can make a decision that will determine whether you're a victim of what's coming or whether you're one of the people who saw it early and prepared. Path 1. You can ignore this. You can close this video, go back to your routine, hope I'm wrong, hope it doesn't happen, hope someone else fixes it. You can keep contributing to your 401k with its penalty walls and processing delays. You can keep your wealth in digital accounts that can be frozen with a keystroke. You can trust the system that's been lying to you about inflation, that's running crisis simulations in secret, that's building CBDC infrastructure while denying what it's for. You can take that path, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe hyperinflation won't come. Maybe the elites aren't preparing for what they clearly are preparing for. Maybe the $35 trillion in debt will just work itself out. But if I'm right,
You'll wake up one day in a system you didn't choose and can't escape. You'll watch your savings evaporate while withdrawal requests sit in processing queues. You'll see the CBDC solution offered and realize too late that it's a cage. And you'll wish you'd acted when you had time. Path 2. You can prepare. You can educate yourself. You can take steps right now, today, to protect your wealth, your freedom, your family. Not panic, not reckless action, strategic preparation. Move some wealth to hard assets, gold and silver that you physically hold, not ETFs that are just more paper promises. Land and real property that can't be inflated away. Commodities, tools, things with intrinsic value. Reduce your exposure to penalty-locked accounts. I'm not saying drain your 401k and pay the 40% hit, but maybe you redirect new contributions to accessible savings, even though it costs you the tax advantage. Maybe you build cash reserves outside the retirement system, accepting the tax burden now instead of risking total loss later. Develop valuable skills. Learn things that will be tradable regardless of what currency we're using. Build real-world networks and communities of people who see what's coming. Stay informed. Understand monetary history. Watch what the insiders are doing with their own money, not what they're recommending you do with yours. When smart money is selling while telling you to buy, pay attention to what they're doing, not what they're saying. Educate others in your circle. The more people who understand what's happening, the harder the plan becomes to execute. And politically, demand transparency. Support policies that limit CBDC power. Vote with knowledge of monetary policy, not just social issues and cultural battles. Right now, you're ahead of 99% of people. You see what's coming. That gives you time. Not years. Maybe not even a full year, but time. Use it. History is full of people who saw the crisis coming and prepared. The families who bought gold before Nixon closed the gold window in 1971 and ended dollar convertibility. The investors who went to cash before the dot-com bubble burst. The Germans who converted marks to foreign currency before hyperinflation destroyed everyone else. They were called crazy. They were called paranoid. They were mocked for missing the last run-up before the peak, until they were proven right. You can be one of them. Every major transition in history had people who saw the pattern and survived. Not because they were smarter, not because they were more connected, because they were willing to look paranoid while others celebrated. Because they understood that protecting capital matters more than chasing the last 20% of a bubble. And you're not alone in this. Millions are waking up to the same reality. More people every day are seeing the pattern, connecting the dots, realizing the official story doesn't match reality. Connect with them, share knowledge, prepare together. The window of opportunity is open right now, but it's closing. Every month that passes, the mechanisms get tighter. The CBDC infrastructure becomes more complete. The elite preparation gets more advanced. The timeline gets shorter. So what's it going to be? Will you be someone who watched history happen, who saw the warning signs and hoped someone else would fix it, who trusted the system right up until the moment it trapped you? Or will you be someone who prepared? Someone who recognized the pattern, who understood what was coming, who took action while there was still time? The midnight meetings will continue. The crisis simulations will keep running. The CBDC infrastructure will keep being built. The plans will roll forward regardless of whether you acknowledge them. The only question is, will you be ready? You know the truth now. You've seen the playbook, the 5 steps, the historical pattern, the preparations happening in rooms you'll never enter, the end game they're building toward. What you do with that knowledge, That's your choice. Choose wisely. Because in the age of monetary collapse, knowledge isn't just power, it's survival. If this resonated, if you see the pattern now, share it. Send this to someone who needs to hear it. The more people who understand, the harder their plan becomes. The more people who prepare, the less effective the traps become. Stay informed, stay prepared, stay free. The choice is yours. The timeline is closing. They're preparing for your future. Shouldn't you be?